Good evening, my friends, and welcome to another First Friday event sponsored by the Town of Woodside's Art and Culture Committee, a group of like-minded volunteers who want to present interesting programs for everyone to appreciate and view. And this evening, we have been moving from a variety of different art forms. And this evening, we are quite fortunate to have an artist whose path to art has been a very unusual one, because the artist we're presenting this evening was a plastic surgeon at one point. So she has gone from taking care of people in a different way to broadening her perspective to the planet itself. This evening, she'll be talking about her art and her inspiration, which is the ocean. Now, most of you know that our planet is more than 70% water. Not all of that is fresh water. Most of it is salt water in the oceans that move gently around our planet. You know, one drop of water helps to swell the ocean. None are too small, none are too feeble or too poor to be of service. And this evening's presentation by Kay Young, I think you'll appreciate her perspective of not only her art, but her inspiration and how she wants us to be more aware of the world and the ocean around us. So without further ado, here is Kay. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, good evening, everybody. And first, I want to thank you for spending your Friday evening with us. And welcome to Plastic Free July. Yes, that's actually a thing. And today's the perfect timing for this talk. And if anyone's interested in Plastic Free July, I have put a link on a little resource sheet that I made, and we'll provide that to you later in the presentation. Tom, thank you for the introduction, and let's get started. So the title of my talk is called To See It Differently, and I'm going to talk to you about art and plastic pollution. I've always loved the ocean, and it's fascinating, it's beautiful, it's powerful and peaceful. And I want to make some art that channels its vast and peaceful qualities. The first paintings that I did when I started my art career were about the ocean, and they are large-scale oil paintings that I painted on metal leaf. And I called this series Places for Reflection. One, the ocean's a place where I go to reflect. And also I used the metal leaf, especially the gold leaf, because it alludes to icon painting and the idea of the divine and the sublime. And I want people to think about those qualities of nature. This is a little video that shows the reflective quality of the metal leaf. And you can see when it moves in the light, you can see the metal reflecting. I'm just going to go through a series of some of my paintings. Most of these are large scale. And again, I'm really trying to get at the peaceful and the vast and the spiritual qualities of nature that we find with the ocean. This one you can see is on silver leaf. And these are big paintings. This one's about 6 feet in diameter. This is an installation view of one of my larger paintings. It's about 5 foot by 5 foot. And again, it's on silver leaf. And this painting is a little bit different. This one is black and white oil. It's not on metal leaf. And there's a reason I started doing this series of paintings, and we'll get to that later in the talk. And I got really interested in the ocean surface. And so I decided I would try to draw it, because as an art student, I learned a lot by drawing. And I thought, well, if I can learn to draw this, I'll understand it better. And so I started drawing these ocean surfaces with graphite pencil. And I really fell in love with the drawings and the process. It's very, very meditative for me. And this is a picture of me with one of my larger drawings. It's 8 feet wide. And again, I'm really trying to get at that vast and peaceful quality that you find. We'll go through some of my other drawings. And again, these are all pencil on paper. Again, this is another really large one. This is again 8 feet wide. And this one is as well. Here's a picture of one of my drawings at an installation at an art show. Again, just to give you an idea of the scale of it. And this is most recent one is from Art Market San Francisco back in April. And that's me with my, excuse me, with my husband there. So I've been really enjoying doing these paintings of the ocean and drawings. But several years ago, I learned about the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. And that was very, very upsetting to me. I had no idea that that plastic was ending up in the ocean. But this is what it looks like. And it's lots of big and small plastic, and it kind of floats near the surface of the ocean. And here's a map of the garbage patches. And you can see that the Great Pacific Garbage Patch is the biggest one. And there's also a garbage patch, they're also called gyres, and there's one in every ocean. And they estimate that 80% of all this waste enters the ocean from land. But another 20% comes from ships, which I was kind of surprised to find that too. There are 5 trash gyres in the oceans. And again, most of the plastic is not visible from above. If you are in a helicopter looking over the trash jar, you might not see that much. I mean, there are some big pieces in there, but a lot of it's really tiny. And that makes it really dangerous for marine life because they can mistake it for food. Again, 90% of it is small particles that are suspended near the surface. As we said, the Great Pacific Garbage Patch is the largest one, and that is twice as large as the state of Texas. And again, there's just trillions of particles in there. They're really vast. These images are from a film called The Albatross, which was made by Chris Jordan. And he and Manuel Maqueda, who was my professor in my circular economy course, went to Midway Island, and they photographed the albatrosses, and they found that so many of these birds had died because of all this plastic in their stomach. And on the right side is a jar filled with plastic, and that came from the stomach of just one bird. And you guys have probably all seen images like this, how the plastic debris can be really damaging to wildlife. But humans are affected too. And in this photograph, you can see a lot of microplastic. And what happens when this plastic ends up in the ocean is that it doesn't dissolve, but it breaks down. The sunlight and the wave energy breaks it down to small pieces, and they're called microplastics. Microplastics get eaten by fish and plankton. And one of the things that's really tough about them is that they tend to absorb toxins from the ocean. So if there's any DDT or toxic chemicals or pesticides in the ocean, they tend to attach themselves to the microplastics. And then when the fish eat them, these chemicals can be released into the bodies of the fish, and then eventually we can eat them. So in addition to getting some of these chemicals and microplastics, microplastics have also been found in the human body in a lot of really surprising places. The lungs, even in the blood. The intestines, and also the placenta. We really don't know the health effects of this yet. Well, the next shocking thing I learned after all that was that less than 9% of our plastic trash is recycled. And actually in 2021, it was only 5 to 6%, so it's getting worse. But this was really upsetting to me because I've been a really diligent recycler for a long, long time. And I always thought that it was all getting recycled. And San Francisco's got a great zero waste philosophy. So I had no idea that such a small amount of our plastic trash was getting recycled. So I started to wonder, well, where does all this plastic go? Well, in 2018, the EPA compiled some statistics, and they found that 75% of it ends up in the landfill. And this can emit greenhouse gases. These landfills can even catch on fire. Might notice some of the smoke in the background of this photograph. 16% of it is incinerated. And that, in addition to greenhouse gases, that produces toxic gases. And about 9% is recycled. And it's estimated that probably 10% of worldwide plastic ends up in the ocean. Again, this is from the EPA. So I started to wonder, are our oceans vast enough for all this plastic? And again, after learning this, I knew that I would need to do something with my art to address this problem. And today's talk is about that journey. So I had some goals for the artwork. The first one was to obviously raise awareness about how serious the plastic problem is. I also want to help people see the problem differently. Also, I think it's important to encourage creativity and innovation, especially here in Silicon Valley. We have some of the most creative people in the world. And I'd also like to inspire action. So that will help solve the problem. So hopefully I can inspire some of you guys tonight to maybe change some things to reduce your plastic footprint. Well, the first idea that I had was to build oceans out of recycled plastic. And that began with some experimentation. But my thought was to see if I could turn single-use plastic into long-lasting works of art. For one, that would keep plastic out of the waste stream. And also, hopefully it would find some creative purposes for it and maybe inspire more creativity. These are some pictures of some of the first prototypes that I made. And I had this wonderful intern from Nueva High School who is an expert with 3D printing. And he taught me how to use my 3D printer. And so we printed up tons and tons of prototypes. And here's a little video of the 3D printer making one of these small models. And this is a picture of what the final one looked like. And again, it's a 3D surface of the ocean. And this one is made from recycled water bottles. I was able to find some 3D printer filament that it came from the Netherlands, where it was made from recycled water bottles that came from Africa. However, the problem with 3D printing is that you can't print very big things. And since my work is so focused on large, vast pieces, I wanted to see if there was a way that I could make something bigger. So I thought, well, how can I make a sculpture that's bigger to try to get more impact? And the first thing I realized I needed to do is I needed to have a good model. So I made some paintings of the ocean with black and white paint. I could have used some of my drawings as templates, but the drawings are very light and delicate, and they didn't really translate very well to the 3D process. So I made a series of these black and white oil paintings. And again, this is step one. And step two was to convert it into a 3D digital model. And that's what it looked like on my computer. Step three was to carve it into a sheet of translucent recycled plastic. So you can see here, this is a piece of white plastic. It's kind of translucent. And this is number 2 plastic, which is, if you look at the label on the bottom, this would be high density polyethylene, i.e. milk jug, shampoo bottle, that sort of thing. And what was really cool was when we put the sculpture up to the light, you could see the painting image really clearly. So that was kind of a serendipitous discovery. And so I thought, well, let's mount it on a light box. So this is what the piece looks like framed. And then when we turn the light on, you can see what happens. And this is a larger piece. This is an installation view from an art fair in Miami. Now, unfortunately, this project is currently on hold. And the reason for that is that it was just almost impossible for me to find any decent recycled plastic during the pandemic. And you can see in this photograph here, I tried to make one of these carvings and you can see the bubbles and there were a lot of impurities and it just didn't work very well. And I actually called every plastic manufacturer in the US that I could find, trying to get my hands on some recycled HDPE, and almost nobody had it. And they basically told me, there's no recycled resin on the market right now. We can't get it. So that just told me a lot about the state of recycling in the US, i.e. it's not really happening. So I had another idea, and this one was to put some gold leaf on some of the plastic that I found out on my walks. You know, I did a lot of walking and I was always seeing plastic bottles and plastic litter. And I just thought, is there any way that I can use this artistically? So these are some of the first gold bottles that I gold leafed, and they're kind of pretty. And I experimented with different things. We made some videos of them. And a lot of people ask me, like, why are you gold leafing plastic trash? And I thought, well, there's a couple of reasons. The first one is that gold draws our attention. I think plastic has become so ubiquitous and so normal in our society that we don't even really see it. And the gold draws attention to that. I think plastic, I don't want it to feel like it's so normal. The second thing, it's pretty absurd. Like, why would you put 23 karat gold on plastic trash? That's absurd. But honestly, I think it's more absurd that we use this material that lasts for over 400 years as something that we use once and throw away after seconds of use. And finally, gold is a symbol of money and value. And there's a lot of money and financial interests that drive the plastic pollution problem. And I also want us to think about, what do we really value? But I thought, how do I create an exhibit out of this? And it's kind of cool to have the plastic bottles, but I didn't really, how could I exhibit them to have more impact? And I thought about it for a while, and I finally had an idea: aquariums. And that was how my exhibit, Aquaria of the Plastocene, was born. Now I made this as a virtual exhibit, partly because I made it during the pandemic and there weren't a lot of great venues available to have an in-person exhibit. And plus a lot of people weren't really going out to exhibits. So I made it virtual. And I think some of the advantages of that is that I can, share it more. And I don't know if you guys have ever heard the phrase the Plastocene era, but that's what we live in. And that's otherwise known as the age of plastics. And despite all we know about the ocean plastic crisis, the world is increasing its plastic production every year. And so more plastic is ending up in the ocean. So I want the artworks to ask us a few questions, and I'd like for you to consider some of these questions as we go through the exhibit. What do we really treasure most? And what does our culture of convenience actually cost us? So I'm going to go through and show you some of these works. And what I wanted to do was put these aquariums in front of my artwork of the ocean. So I want to juxtapose nature with our consumer culture. So we'll go through these and you can have a look, and then I'll explain. Each of the art pieces has a story behind it. So we'll go through that in a minute. The first one, I called it 2050. Again, this is a 23 karat leafed plastic bottle with a vintage fishbowl. I called it that because 2050 is a year that is estimated that we'll have more plastic than fish in the oceans if we don't change our plastic use. Next one, this is called Coke or Pepsi. And I don't know if you know this, but Coca-Cola is the #1 plastic polluter in the world, and Pepsi is number 2. So in this piece, Coca-Cola wins the gold medal. So those bottles got the gold leaf, and Pepsi won the silver medal. This one's called Grab and Go. And this just reminds me whenever I go into a coffee shop or a small market and want to get some lunch, and so much of the stuff comes in plastic. And surprisingly, everything in this case is made from plastic that's not recycled. All the plastic containers that you see are number 5 plastic, and that's really common with yogurt containers, a lot of cream cheese, sour cream to-go containers. And in the United States, less than 1% of this is actually recycled. You know, I've been washing my yogurt containers out for years, and I was really, really upset to learn that they don't really get recycled. The plastic cutlery, pretty tough to recycle. And finally, the coffee bag and the energy bar and the candy wrappers, those have plastic linings, and those can't be recycled either. This one's called the New Coal, and these are some gold leaf water bottles that I put inside a vintage coal scuttle. You guys probably know this, but plastic is made from fossil fuel. Right now, the United States is in the process of bringing 42 new plastic refineries online. These cause a lot of emissions, and even according to the oil company's own data, this is the same number of emissions that you would get if you added 27 new coal plants. And of course, most of these refineries are near low-income communities. Most of them are in Louisiana and Texas. I don't know if you've heard of Cancer Alley in Louisiana, but there's a new plastic plant that they're trying to put in there, and the residents are really protesting, and hopefully they'll be able to prevent this plastic plant from coming online. And so in my opinion, plastic is becoming the new coal. This is the Crystal Geyser collection. And Crystal Geyser was the most common brand of water bottle I found when I was out on my walks collecting all this litter. This one's called Wishcycling, and I am certainly guilty of wishcycling myself. And wishcycling is when you put things in the recycling bin that you hope will be recycled, but you're not sure. So this recycling bin actually contains a lot of containers that you'd think would be recyclable because they have the chasing arrows sign on the bottom, but they're actually not. So just because it has those arrows doesn't mean it can be recycled. I'm going to go through it. There's a yogurt tub, which is number 5 plastic, which we just talked about. The number 6 were the sushi trays, and that's polystyrene, and that doesn't get recycled. It's actually kind of toxic. I don't really know that I want to be eating my food off of that. The Florida's natural orange juice comes in number 7 plastic, which means it's called miscellaneous, which means they don't know what kind of plastic it is. So that's probably not going to get recycled either. And surprisingly, the Starbucks cups are not recyclable. I can't tell you how many of those I've put in the compost bin or in the recycling bin, but they're actually made of layered paper and plastic. And and I guess technically they're recyclable because you could separate that, but that's just so impractical that it never happens. So really the Starbucks cups need to go in the landfill and not in the recycling or the compost. This was called Forever Peanuts, and it's a little vintage Japanese fish aquarium and filled with gold leaf styrofoam peanuts, which arrived in some package that I got. And of course, these aren't biodegradable, they're not recyclable, and they can last for hundreds of years. And they also are small and they float, and they'd be easily mistaken for food by marine life. I put this in a vintage container because I really hope that these will be a relic of the past one day. And I've got some future projects. I'm playing around with virtual reality. So you can see this is in 3D. So this might be one of my next projects. So stay tuned for that. And now I thought I'd show you a look behind the scenes. want to take you through the process of creating one of these artworks from concept to completion. This new piece was inspired by grocery shopping. Our grocery stores are overwhelmed with single-use plastic packaging. It's become so normal that before I started on this project, I didn't really see it. And I'm hoping this artwork will help you see it more clearly too. This particular project was inspired by a trip to Whole Foods. I've loved shopping there, and I've always liked their organic and healthy choices. And they opened a brand new mega store at Stonestown Mall in San Francisco, and I was really excited to check it out. However, I was unprepared for my reaction during my visit. As I walked through the store, I became overwhelmingly disappointed as I noticed how much plastic was everywhere. Produce was in plastic, desserts and snacks and fruit and condiments, and really almost everything. And I wondered, how can a store founded on whole and healthy foods be filled with so much plastic? It felt like Whole Foods is adding more plastic instead of making efforts to reduce it. And honestly, I expected more from Whole Foods. So I thought about how at best only 5 to 6% of this plastic is being recycled, and the rest is going to end up in landfill incinerators of the ocean. And this is just one grocery store. Imagine all the plastic in the more than 63,000 grocery stores in the US. That's just a huge amount of plastic. We buy it and use it every day, and it's become so normal that we don't even see it. The other thing that upset me was that there were a lot of groceries I wanted to buy that only came in plastic packaging. So that became the idea behind this particular project. So with my 2 interns from Nueva High School, I went shopping, and we purchased items where there was no alternative to plastic packaging. Orange juice, dried fruit, dish soap, half and half, tofu, protein powder, popcorn. And then we went back to the studio to assemble it. After cleaning out the containers and stuffing some of them with more plastic waste, we began the gold leafing process. First, we painted them with a sienna base, which is like you do in traditional gold leafing, and then covered them with an adhesive called size. And then applied the gold leaf, which is actually genuine 23 karat gold. And you can just watch some of the leafing process going on here. Finally, we assembled the gold leaf items into a shopping basket, and we named the project Whole Plastics. I'd really like to see Whole Foods do better, because I really do love Whole Foods. And since they brand themselves as being for healthy groceries, I really hope that they can do some things to improve their plastic use, or reduce it rather. And I'd like to see other grocery stores do better too. One thing that the stores could do is offer more bulk foods. I was really disappointed that 2 of the Whole Foods in San Francisco that I normally shop at have completely removed their bulk food sections. It'd also be nice if they'd make it easy for customers to bring their own containers. Rainbow Grocery in San Francisco is a wonderful grocery store, and they have tons and tons of bulk food selections, and they make it really easy for you to bring your own container. They have scales set out, and you just weigh your container and you put a sticker on top of it with the tear weight, and then you go fill it up, and they're really ready for that at checkout. So there are ways to do this that make it really easy for customers. I'd also like to see more refill stations. Like you can do refills for shampoo and conditioner and liquid soaps and laundry detergent and olive oil and maple syrup and all kinds of things. And stores could create plastic-free zones. They could highlight the products that they sell that don't use plastic. Like some grocery stores are selling shampoo bars and conditioner bars that don't come in a plastic bottle. Produce can all be plastic-free. And that would help customers make better packaging choices. Also, if they sold more reusable containers, that would be great. Strauss Creamery does sell reusable milk containers, but I haven't seen a lot of other reusable ones yet. It'd also be nice to see some grocery stores maybe pilot a program that uses reusable containers. This came from my local market near my studio, and they used to have a really nice bulk food section, but they got rid of it and put all the things in plastic. And that is more convenient, but wouldn't it be nice if these containers were reusable instead of single-use plastic? I think that would be very convenient, and it would be a nice solution if you don't want to have the bulk bins. So what can you do? First, I want to say that recycling more is not the answer. And I started to wonder, well, if our plastic recycling rates are so low, why isn't more of it recycled? And there's a bunch of reasons for that. The first one is that recycled plastic costs more than virgin plastic, and it's expensive to recycle. And right now, virgin plastic, which is made from oil and natural gas, is really cheap. Recycled plastic is also lower quality, and I saw that firsthand when I tried to buy these recycled sheets for one of my projects. A lot of times the plastic is contaminated with food and labels too. And when plastic is recycled, they don't melt it down, they actually grind it up into small pieces, and then they kind of form it into things. And you can see in this photograph all the labels that are on these bottles. I'm not sure what happens to them when they grind it up. So it just doesn't seem like that would be, you know, a really good additive to it. And the last thing is that plastic can only be recycled 1 to 2 times. And then the quality becomes so poor that it's really not useful at all. So then what do you do with it? The other thing that's interesting is that the whole idea of recycling was actually founded by the plastics industry. And I've got a link to an article about this from NPR in the resources at the end. But it was really a response to consumer complaints back in the 80s and 90s when plastic started to proliferate. And a lot of people started complaining about all the plastic litter that they found. And so the plastics industry thought, oh, this is a problem. Well, we need to make consumers feel better about this. So they encouraged the use of the blue bins. They also made sure that they got those chasing arrow symbols on all the plastic. And that's really misled us, I think. I mean, I would see the chasing arrow symbol on something and think, oh, well, that can be recycled. Great. It's not a problem to use this. But as we've learned earlier, that's not true. And then they also started a lot of recycling centers, but they quietly shut them down because they cost so much and they were ineffective. I think the best solutions involve reducing the amount of plastic that we use. And there's actually quite a few things that we can do. One of the first things we can do is a reusable bottle. And I've got my Hydro Flask right here. And I just never buy water, never buy bottled water anymore. So I'd say don't buy any drinks in plastic or actually disposable cups like Starbucks either. If you can, get a ceramic mug when you go for coffee or bring your own reusable mug. That can really save you a lot of plastic. If you like fizzy drinks, I would suggest maybe investing in a soda stream, and then you can have a lot of fun making creative drinks. If you can, choose a glass or aluminum container instead of plastic. These milk containers come in glass, but if you say you're shopping for mayonnaise, look around because you might find a few brands that come in glass. So choose that over the one in the plastic. And there are a lot of things that do have a glass option, or aluminum too. And if you can find something reusable, which is kind of difficult, that's even better. Again, shopping in bulk is a really good way to reduce your plastic footprint. And if you can, bring your own container. And reusable bags are great too. I know in California, we've learned to bring our own bags because they have the bag taxes. So the shopping bags are great, but also if you want to bring some cotton bags or reusable bags for produce, that'll save a lot of plastic too. The other thing that I think can really make a big difference is divesting. And if you can, remove your money from businesses that support single-use plastic. And I actually have done this myself recently. I learned that my bank, Wells Fargo, had their shareholders vote in April to continue funding the oil and gas industry, the fossil fuel industry. And although 11% of the shareholders voted against it, it wasn't enough to change it. And I just thought, I don't want them using my money to support this. So I did some research and I found that First Republic Bank has a statement on their website that they don't they don't lend money to the fossil fuel industry. So I'm in the process of switching my bank account. And I'm really excited to tell Wells Fargo why I'm closing my account. Outreach is really important too. And contact your favorite brands. I've done this a lot, and obviously a lot of times they listen. You can see the secret deodorant here. Now you can get it in a zero plastic refill. And that's definitely in response to customer requests and complaints. So the more companies get pressured about plastic-free options, the more likely they're going to come up with some of these innovations. And it's really not that hard to put the deodorant into a cardboard tube. The other final thing is to learn more about zero waste living. I've made a resource sheet for you, and we're going to try to get it to you in some sort of link. And we've got some interesting things on here, some films, some resources, where to find plastic-free groceries near you, and some other organizations that you can support that are really helpful in reducing plastic. So last thing, is there any hope? Yes, actually there's a lot of hope. Just this week, California passed SB 54, and that's the first major bill in the US to reduce single-use plastic. Again, some people think it should have gone farther, but I think it still does a lot, and it's just great to get something started. And that's going to reduce a lot of single-use plastic, and it's also going to make companies ensure that if they do use single-use plastic, that it gets recycled and gets recycled promptly. Canada has just banned a lot of single-use plastic. And like I just showed you there, some companies are starting to offer reusable containers. There's a company called Loop that you can order a lot of your favorite products, and they've got big brands on board like Procter & Gamble and Unilever, and they are offering reusable containers. And I think it's still a little bit more of a pilot, but hopefully that's going to become more prevalent. The European Union is actually ahead of us, and they have passed some laws called extended producer responsibility laws, which is a long way of saying that if you sell single-use plastic, you have to help pay for cleaning it up. And you'll also have to educate consumers about trying to reduce plastic. Actually, before we go into this next one, there are 9 states in the US that are considering extended producer responsibility legislation. So hopefully we'll get some of that here too. And I think the pressure from individuals has really made a difference. So your actions can make a difference too. Here are a few links for resources, and if you want to copy some of this down, you can get my resource sheet by going to plasticoceanart.com and click on the resources link, or you can go to tinyurl and go to See It Differently resources. I also have a quiz that you guys will probably all ace because we've gone through most of this, but it's about plastic use, and it's called the See It Differently quiz, and that's also on tinyurl. And also, if you have any questions about this, feel free to go to my website at kbyoung.com and email me. Thank you all for spending your time with me tonight and for listening. And I hope you have a wonderful 4th of July weekend, and I hope you have a plastic-free 4th of July weekend. Again, thank you very much. And now I think we've got some time for questions.
Yes, we do. And we do have questions. But first of all, I want to thank you, Dave, for that wonderful presentation and hopefully raising the level of awareness of things that are going on. So one of the questions that we've had actually from several people is regarding K-cups for coffee makers. What do you have to say about K-cups?
Oh,
I imagine you have something.
Well, a lot of K-cups are in plastic, and
Yes.
I don't think a lot of those get recycled. So I would have a serious think about that if I was using K-cups. Now I know Nespresso uses aluminum pods, and those can be recycled, and you can actually mail them back to Nespresso. So that would be a better choice.
Yes, I'm aware that there are third parties that make basically aluminum K-cups that you can reuse, and you get to decide what kind of coffee or tea or whatever that you wish to put in them. And I like those too.
Yeah, I
And
think that's a great idea.
then,
One
yeah,
of
then
the things
somebody
too,
is asking about, what about aluminum recycling?
oh, I'm so glad you asked, because I was just getting ready to say something about that. Aluminum is one of those things that can be infinitely recycled. In fact, they estimate that 70% of the aluminum that we have mined so far is still in use because of recycling. And recycling aluminum is actually cheaper and requires much less energy than it does to smelt aluminum from ore. So recycled aluminum is great. You really can have an infinite circle with that.
Fantastic. And then someone has mentioned that most of the recycled plastic that was done in China, that most of our plastic was collected and shipped to China. Were you aware of that, or do you have some perspective on that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it was, and I think that probably has to do with why our recycling rate in the US has gone down. I'm not sure, but China got very, very strict about the type of plastic that they would accept. And it had to be really clean and really pure. And most cities did not have good enough sorting and cleansing to meet the standards from China. Apparently, San Francisco did. I think a lot of our plastic still was able to go to China, but they do a lot of recycling, but it's kind of horrifying in a way. There's a movie out there, it's a documentary called Plastic China, and it's about a family that runs a recycling business, and it is very eye-opening. And when you see these little kids playing in these piles of plastic trash, it doesn't make you feel that great about recycling.
No. And then, are you familiar with thermoplastics?
What do you mean by thermoplastics?
Thermoplastics, question is, I guess that's a very recyclable style of plastic. It doesn't have any kind of lining, etc. So it makes it easy to be melted and reformed to use.
Yeah. Well, I don't know much about that, but if that's how it is, that sounds like that would be a much better alternative than some of the things we're using.
Okay, and then someone is asking that with your engineering and medical backgrounds, what kind of, or how has that helped fuse your activism and art and reducing plastic use?
Well, I think when I studied engineering, I was really interested in material science. And I guess plastic is kind of material science. So I think it just gave me a lot of curiosity and just some understanding of science and physics. And I think it's just helped me it's been easier for me to become informed about this.
Great. That was a question from somebody who says that they've known you for 40 years, so
Wow.
they would know. So why do, other than, let's say, the expense, why do you think that more plastic, people are asking, is not recycled? I mean, you've touched it a little bit, but I just wanted to give you an opportunity because this question has been asked several times here. Why is it more plastic recycled?
Well, for one thing, it's expensive, and I think contamination is a big problem. I mean, we can wash our plastic out a lot, but I mean, how many times have you walked past a recycling bin and seen all kinds of really dirty plastic in there? And it's hard to wash out some of that stuff. It's hard to get the labels off. So I think a lot of plastic comes in a form where it's difficult to recycle it without going through a lot of expense to get it to a place where it's recyclable. And then I think the third issue is the quality is pretty poor. There's also a study recently where they looked at safety of using recycled plastic in consumer beverage bottles, because I think there's some push to make sure that at 25% or a certain percentage of the plastic in our bottles is recycled. And there was some question about chemical contamination with that. So I think we do need to look at the safety of that before we say, oh, let's put recycled plastic into all of our plastic. I mean, if it's going to be around food or beverage, I think you have to be really careful with it.
Now, we have a question from somebody who's perhaps closer to my vintage, who's talking about medical use of plastic, just like in disposable syringes that we've all encountered over and over again. When I was growing up, the syringes were made with glass.
Wow. Yeah, those glass syringes are actually quite beautiful, but when I was practicing medicine, it was all disposable and it's pretty horrifying when we would do a surgery. And at the end, when we would look at like 3 or 4 gigantic trash bags filled with waste, it was pretty horrifying. I think there is some need for medicine that single use, if we're gonna, that's gonna be an area where it's a little harder to get rid of single use for some things like IV tubing, but I think there's a lot that can be done. Like going back to glass reusable syringes is certainly an option for some things. And also, there were just so many disposable things that we use that you could probably make a reusable form of it. And I think 40 years ago, everything was kind of reusable, but disposables are so cheap and easy that we've really turned to them. I think we could do better, but I think that's going to be an area where it's a little tougher to get rid of single-use plastic.
Mhm. And then someone has sent in a question regarding, are you familiar with a startup company called Novo Loop? They are a company run by women, and they've developed a technology that breaks down plastic and film and reclaim the chemicals to reuse with no toxic consequence.
I think that sounds great. And one of the things that I learned when I took my class in circular economy was that there are a lot of little things like this that can work, but we have to figure out if they can't be done on a really massive scale, then they're not going to be really effective. So that would be my question. I'm not familiar with that particular startup, but I think it's wonderful that they're doing that. And if they can figure out how to scale it, I think that would be really helpful.
I believe that they are working on that. At least that's what the question submitter has suggested. So that would be
Yeah,
fantastic.
yeah. I mean, we definitely need some of that because like we said, we're not going to be able to eliminate all of our single-use plastic, but if we can get rid of a lot of it and then we can find a safe way to recycle it where it's actually safe to use and it's cost effective, I think that would really help us.
Yes, because the way plastic and recycling occurs in Europe, they are so far ahead of the United States as far as educating the public about single-use plastics and restricting that. It certainly would be nice if that was happening here in the United States.
Yeah, yeah, Europe is doing a much better job than we are, and hopefully we'll learn something from them. I think California is, I mean, we should be proud of our state because we're really doing more than anybody else in the US. And a lot of times we are the leaders and we're so big that once we make a rule, a lot of the manufacturers have to go along because they don't want to lose the California market. So I'm hoping some of this new legislation will push us towards Europe. Yes, Europe is much more enlightened in this respect than we are.
Yes, well, Jacques Cousteau said that that the sea is our universal sewer, and I think that we're certainly seeing that with plastic. And I started out this evening when I said one drop of water helps to swell the ocean. None are too small, too feeble, too poor to be of service. And I think artists like yourself are helping to be a part of that and to change that situation. Sylvia Earle said, no water, no life, no blue, no green, and no planet. Former President Clinton said that we know when we protect our oceans, we're protecting our future. And that's really true. So I just want to thank you again this evening for your wonderful and informative presentation. And I would like to remind all of our viewers that this presentation will be available on YouTube in a very short time, so you can watch our YouTube channel. And to remind you that we'll be changing the subject a little bit next month when we have a wonderful judge, Ladoris Cordell, who will be talking about her book. So please join us again in August. And thank you, Kay, for your wonderful presentation. It's been a great time. And when it comes to the ocean, I'm always think of the E. Cummings poem where he said, no matter what you lose, like a you or our me, it's always ourselves that we find at the sea. So hopefully when we go to the sea, we won't just be finding plastic everywhere. So thank you all again for joining us. Please stay well and take care of each other. And thank you for joining us again for the Woodside Arts and Culture presentation this evening. Good night.
Good night.